Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing 3.3 Stalin's USSR, and we're going to be first looking at Stalin's succession. So, 1924, Lenin died, and obviously Trotsky, he was a very important figure, so why didn't he take Lenin's space? Well, he did organize the Red Guards and he did organize the Brest-Litovsk and the peace treaty. However, the disadvantages were the fact that he offended senior ministers, he lost support, so therefore he lost support quickly. He didn't take opposition seriously, and he built up this hatred for people himself. And he also wanted global communism, and society was very fearful. They didn't want foreign influence, and they didn't want to engage in any acts of war. Trotsky also felt ill when he needed to be strong, and Stalin's benefit were the fact that he felt ill, obviously, and he was also able to trick Trotsky into Lenin's funeral date. And so Trotsky didn't attend, whereas Stalin did, and he appeared to be his best friend. And so therefore, obviously, people would think that Stalin was much more closer. Stalin also appeared to be a normal Dorian peasant, unlike Trotsky, and he also wanted socialism in one country. Stalin took boring but important roles, and he placed his key supporters in the key places, unlike Trotsky, who didn't do anything. So, what were the purges and the terror? So, the purges and the terror occurred in the 1930s. Stalin started getting rid of any opposition. He started crushing them. And he basically eradicated anyone who he thought were suspects or opponents and traitors. He held show trials, and these made people confess their traitory to the country. And I think it would have been a longer, painful way of death, and they would have found a way to torture you until you confessed anyway. And the NKVD shot down anyone, went to people's houses, barged in. People were very fearful. They could come at any time without any proper reasoning. So this is known as a Great Terror, and that people were very fearful. However, this was also disadvantage because when Russia entered World War II, Stalin didn't have enough. He didn't have enough fighters. He didn't have enough people to fight for the country, so he had to release these prisoners, and as well as the fact he lost experienced officers as well. And he sent many people to gulags and labor camps, which were basically in Siberia, hostile conditions where it was hard to survive. And many historians argue that maybe this was one of Stalin's key purposes, because they built many large projects and many bridges and ports and stuff. So it obviously helped Russia develop. So what was the reasons for Stalin's modernization of the USSR? Number 1 was to establish his reputation. Number 2, establish communism. Number 3, to increase the military strength. Number 4, to rival capitalist countries and prove that communism also had the equal ability to rival them. Number 5 was to increase food supplies. So what was the modernization of agriculture? That was known as collectivization. Collectivization involved taking smaller kolkhozs, so smaller plots of land, and making it into larger, more efficient ones. This increased agriculture productions drastically, very quickly. However, everything was obviously shared. Tools, tractors, animals, resources, everything was shared. And obviously kulaks detested this. And Stalin didn't like kulaks. He came from a poor farmer background, so obviously he wouldn't like these rich peasants. So he sent them to gulags and labor camps. Many kulaks, they protested by burning their crops and slaughtering their livestock and their cattle. However, Stalin had achieved his aim, and he managed to eradicate the kulaks and achieve his aim of collectivization. Now, collectivization, it also led to many food shortages because people were unwilling to cooperate. As I said before, society was very backward. They didn't want any changes. They were being told by Stalin to leave their ancient techniques used by their ancestors and go for the newer ones. And they didn't know how to use tractors. They didn't know how to use anything, and they didn't want to, so they didn't try. And so this led to food shortages. However, in the long term, you can argue that it led to less food shortages because obviously it increased agriculture, and it enabled people to obviously fight. 5-year plan. So 5-year plan was to increase industry. It involved God's plan. So God's plan was the officials that obviously planned the 5-year plan. God's plan set the target for an area or a region. The region sent it for a factory or a mine. The factory or mine sent it for a manager to a foreman, and foreman to a worker. And this allowed strict discipline, strict setting, and the targets were so high they were near impossible to meet. Propaganda was used, bombarded against the workers. Propaganda, medals, trophies, holidays, everything possible were offered to try and get people to increase their agricultural input. There's also a guy, I don't know what his name was, Alexei Stalins, and he's basically one of the most famous people. He did so many crops in like one shift, more than other people could do. So under the 5-year plan, there were two, and industry, coal, iron, gas, all of these stuff increased, and it enabled Russia to become a superpower and therefore resist Germany when they attacked. So that was an advantage. But it also led to many deaths because absence resulted in firing, slacking obviously punished. So what was Stalin's propaganda and censorship? So cult of personality displayed Stalin as a hero. Religion was banned. He thought it was a distraction. Soviet propaganda and education. Children were raised to understand Soviets and become Soviet soldiers and loyal, as well as the fact that sports and leisure activities increased and investment in them increased. And socialism, realism also took place. So arts and books and media were controlled. So lots of censorship. The impact of World War II. So when Hitler invaded, Stalin was very surprised despite several warnings. He ordered the scorched earth policy. He reconstructed all the Ural Mountains he reconstructed all the factories and mines into the Ural Mountains, reconstructed them, so it was harder for Germans to reach. Germans obviously had to surrender because harsh weather turned against them. They couldn't take over a factory or a mine to get their production. Pro-Nazis, as an impact, pro-Nazis suffered. Stalin and USSR also suffered. Stalin did his best to try and raise the morale. He had propaganda speeches, films, and tried to raise the idea of the sacrifice of Russia and how much it had gone through. So those are some of the impacts. And as you guys already know, Stalin obviously became, in the Cold War, Eastern Europe was a Soviet sphere of influence because Russia had suffered so much. They had lost so much land. So that was all of 3.3 Stalin's USSR done.